Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Kane's video of Audra and Nate's tense encounter makes Lily cry. Shows that when Audra Charles and Nate Hastings have a heated confrontation, Lily Winters will mourn over Kane Ashby's video. Audra will gripe to Sally Spectre at Crimson Lights about Nate taking Claire Newman's statements at face value. Audra would still feel upset by Nate's response even if she was in fact harboring secrets about the breakup plot for Victor Newman. After telling Sally about leaving and how final it felt, Audra will give a glimmer of hope that Nate will realize how much they matter to one another. Now that she has joined Abbott Communications, Audra will worry about the Abbotts becoming an issue when the conversation shifts to the launch party. Even though Sally promises to avoid interfering, Audra will still be rather worried. Nate will notify Devon Winters and Lily at Society on his separation from Audra. Lily and Devon won't believe it, even though Nate will concede that Audra might have been telling the truth about the entire incident with Kyle Abbott. Nate will eventually acknowledge that Claire's account of what happened looks more plausible. They won't want Nate to blame himself for surrendering his heart to the wrong person, but they will assume that Devon and Lily were correct about Audra all along. On Wednesday's Y&R show, Audra will come in to get takeaway and will briefly meet Nate's gaze before hurriedly leaving. Audra will stop briefly outside and appear upset about what she has lost. Kane Ashby will call Lily in the interim to inquire if she has seen his video or heard from the twins. Both queries will be answered negatively, but Lily promises to notify Kane if the twins contact her. Lily will then go to the park and watch Kane's video message by herself, which will cause her to cry and appear thoughtful. Kane will visit Billy Abbott's home and confess that he is abandoning his takeover schemes. Kane will maintain that Billy has every right to pursue Chancellor despite Billy's skepticism. Kane will say that his children and the harm he has caused are the reasons for his change of heart when Billy questions why. Though he will now understand that you can't give someone something they don't want, Kane will also admit that he wanted Chancellor for Lily. Sally will arrive home and grow suspicious over Kane's presence, so she'll grill Billy once Kane takes off. Billy will inform Sally that Kane has changed his mind about all of his ambitious goals for Genoa City. Billy will have to think about the likelihood that Kane wants to draw attention to himself by portraying him as a danger to the Newmans. That might divert the attention of the Newman clan while Kane fulfills his true purpose. Sally will observe that Abbott Communications will have their first major story if they can determine what Kane is actually up to. Billy will think about Kane's intention to throw him off balance and question why. Joshua Morrow's character Nick Newman will listen in on Phyllis Summer's irritated message for Kane in the park. Kane can't just drop a bomb like that and hang up, Phyllis will say. Nick will question Phyllis and presume that Kane is already raising suspicions about his intentions. Phyllis will consistently reject Nick's attempts to assist her and insist that she can save things. Phyllis will push Nick to back off despite his repeated warnings that she might alienate everyone and wind up with nothing. Kane's video of Audra and Nate's tense encounter makes Lily cry, and what unfolds around it becomes a cascading storm that shakes Genoa City's most intricate bonds, exposing wounds, loyalties, and regrets that no one is prepared to face. The video itself is raw, unpolished, and achingly revealing, capturing the exact moment when Audra Charles and Nate Hastings stood toe-to-toe, their voices sharp, their emotions uncontrolled, and their defenses crumbling as accusations and denials clashed in a storm of truth and lies. For Lily Winters, watching Kane Ashby's recording of that confrontation is like being forced to relive every fragile crack in her own past with Kane, every tear shed over secrets and betrayals, every attempt to balance her heart's desires with the brutal realities of loyalty and deception. When Lily watches the footage alone in the park, her face lit only by the soft glow of her phone, tears well and slide down her cheeks as she sees Nate's frustration, his brokenness bleeding through every angry word hurled at Audra, and she sees Audra, equally defensive, deflecting and reframing with the kind of cunning survival instinct that Lily recognizes far too well. To Lily, it isn't just about Nate and Audra's doomed romance. It's about Kane's reminder that life in Genoa City is perpetually tethered to lies, power struggles, and impossible choices that cost everyone dearly. Yet before Lily reaches that moment in the park, the dominoes of drama fall elsewhere, beginning with Audra herself, who vents her anger and confusion to Sally Spectre at Crimson Lights. Audra, who cannot shake the humiliation of Nate believing Claire Newman's words over her own, complains bitterly, her voice rising with indignation as she insists that Nate refused to give her the benefit of the doubt, that he clung to Claire's account because it fit into his own doubts and insecurities. Though Sally tries to steady the conversation, Audra keeps circling back to her frustration at being dismissed, her conviction that Nate's rejection is final even as she admits in a softer, cracked voice that she cannot completely shut the door on him, that she harbors a desperate hope that he will remember what they shared and realize how much they still mean to one another. The conversation shifts when Sally probes into Abbott communications, and Audra's expression flickers with unease as she admits she worries the Abbotts will turn her job into another battlefield, particularly with the looming launch party. Though Sally vows not to meddle, Audra cannot escape the feeling of impending doom, and her unease lingers as Nate, on the other side of town, confides in Devon Winters and Lily at society. Nate speaks in clipped tones at first, revealing that he and Audra have split, and though he admits Audra might have told the truth about Kyle Abbott and the incident in France, he cannot ignore the fact that Claire's detailed account rings far true. Devon and Lily exchange a knowing glance, their skepticism heavy in the air, because both have long suspected Audra's motives, and while they reassure Nate not to blame himself for trusting the wrong person, they cannot help but feel validated that their instincts were correct. The conversation sits heavy in Nate's chest, especially as he remembers Damien Kane's death, Carter's misguided choices, and the grief that still throbs inside him, leaving him raw and vulnerable in a way Audra never truly respected. Later that week, in a fleeting moment at society, Audra walks in to grab takeaway, her eyes briefly locking with Nate's across the room before she quickly looks away and bolts, her posture stiff with suppressed heartbreak. Outside, she pauses, the facade cracking as her lips tremble and her eyes glisten with regret, the weight of what she has lost pressing down on her until she can barely breathe. While Audra battles her turmoil, Kane dials Lily, his voice steady yet carrying a quiet intensity as he asks if she has seen his video or heard from the twins. Lily, still reeling, answers no to both questions but promises to let him know if the twins reach out. Their call is brief, almost clinical, yet it reverberates in Lily's chest like an echo of a life she once shared with him, a reminder of the ways Kane always found to tether her back into his orbit, whether she wanted to be there or not. And so, unable to resist, Lily takes herself to the park, opens the video file Kane sent, and presses play. As the screen fills with Nate's anguished voice, Audra's defensive retorts, and the tension that radiates between them, Lily feels her own barriers dissolve. Tears spill freely as she watches, her sobs muffled against her sleeve, because what hurts most is not simply what she sees, it's the way Kane chose to show it to her, the way he knows exactly which strings to pull to remind her of their entanglement, their shared scars, their mutual griefs. At the same time, Kane himself is making moves that bewilder others. He arrives at Billy Abbott's home with a weary look and announces that he is abandoning his takeover schemes. Billy, skeptical as ever, questions his sincerity, demanding to know why a man who has spent years plotting and maneuvering would suddenly change course. Kane insists that it's because of his children and the damage he has caused, that he cannot keep pushing when the people he claims to love are the ones being broken in the process. He even admits, with a quiet vulnerability, that he wanted Chancellor not for himself but for Lily, to give her what he thought she deserved, though he now understands that no gift or empire can replace what someone does not want to receive. Billy listens, torn between suspicion and empathy, but Sally's arrival complicates matters as she notices Kane's presence and later questions Billy about it. Once Kane leaves, Sally presses harder, and Billy reveals that Kane has supposedly abandoned his ambitions. But as Billy explains Kane's words, Sally grows thoughtful, suggesting that perhaps Kane is only shifting tactics, that by painting himself as reformed he could be diverting attention from his true objective while distracting the Newman clan. Billy cannot dismiss the possibility, and he begins to suspect that Kane's real game is to throw him off balance while quietly advancing another agenda. Sally, sensing a story, tells Billy that Abbott Communications could have their first big scoop if they uncover what Kane is really plotting, and the idea lingers in Billy's mind long after their talk. Meanwhile, in another corner of Genoa City, Nick Newman overhears Phyllis Summers fuming in the park, her voice sharp and exasperated as she leaves a message for Kane, accusing him of dropping a bombshell and then vanishing. Nick, concerned, steps in and questions her, pressing for details about what Kane has done now, but Phyllis bristles, deflecting his attempts to insert himself into her mess. She insists she can fix everything on her own, rejecting Nick's warnings that her stubbornness could leave her alienated and alone. Even as Nick pleads with her to take a step back, Phyllis hardens, pushing him away and insisting that his interference is not only unnecessary but also insulting. Nick, frustrated, reminds her that she has a habit of self-sabotage, but Phyllis digs in, determined to prove him wrong. And so, as Kane's video continues to ripple through Genoa City, breaking Lily's heart, exposing Audra's manipulations, fueling Nate's guilt, igniting Billy's suspicions, entangling Phyllis and Nick into the drama, the true weight of Kane's actions becomes evident. He is not simply a man giving up on schemes. He is a man whose presence continues to haunt every corner of the city, whose choices and secrets fuel the ongoing wars between love, loyalty, ambition, and deception. For Lily, the tears she sheds over his video are more than grief. They are recognition that Kane, in ways both deliberate and unintended, continues to shape her life. For Audra, the confrontation is more than a breakup. It is the beginning of an unraveling she cannot stop. For Nate, the argument is more than betrayal. It is a mirror of his own vulnerabilities. And for everyone else, Kane's supposed retreat might just be the calm before a far more calculated storm. A storm that no amount of tears, denials, or promises can contain. The reverberations of Kane's video did not stop with Lily's tears in the park. In fact, they seemed to multiply with every person who caught a glimpse of the raw emotions trapped in that recording, turning what could have been a private fight between Audra Charles and Nate Hastings into a saga that spilled into Genoa City's coffee shops, corporate offices, and family homes, poisoning trust and planting doubts everywhere. Because the truth, once captured on film and passed from one hand to another, loses the intimacy of its origin and becomes a weapon, a mirror, a story for others to interpret, and that was precisely what Kane Ashby had set in motion, whether or not he admitted it outright when he pressed send. Lily Winters, still shaken from watching the video under the dimming park lights, tried to compose herself as she walked home, but the weight of those images followed her like shadows, Nate's voice trembling with anger, Audra's sharp defensiveness, and most of all, the knowledge that Kane had been the one to film it, the one to capture Nate at his lowest and Audra at her most exposed. She felt as though Kane's eyes were still on her, silently asking if she saw what he wanted her to see, if she understood the message hidden between the lines of that volatile scene. By the time she reached her front door, her face was streaked with tears she hadn't managed to wipe away, and she lingered there, staring at the wood grain, wondering if she should call Nate, warn him, confess that she had seen his humiliation on screen, but instead she let her phone rest heavy in her hand, uncalled numbers burning in her contact list. Meanwhile, Audra had her own reckoning in the privacy of her apartment, where she paced like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she replayed her conversation with Sally at Crimson Lights and then the devastating chill in Nate's voice when he had confessed to Devon and Lily that their relationship was over. She hated the thought that others now pitted her, that Devon and Lily, of all people, saw her as the predictable manipulator who had finally been caught in her own web. And yet what unsettled her more was the image of Nate's face when he doubted her, the way his eyes, once warm, once unguarded, had gone cold with skepticism. She poured herself a glass of wine and tried to drown the memory, but it returned anyway, as if Kane himself had slipped into her thoughts, holding up the video as proof of her downfall. Across town, Nate sat alone at the Tack House, the silence pressing in on him, and he tried to convince himself that the breakup had been inevitable, that Claire Newman's words had only confirmed what he already knew, that Audra was incapable of honesty, that she would always twist and reframe until he doubted his own instincts. But still, part of him ached, because letting go of Audra meant admitting he had once again failed to see the truth until it was too late, just as he had with Elena, just as he had in countless choices that pulled him further away from the man he used to be. His phone buzzed with messages of support from Devon and Lily, their reassurances well-meaning but almost unbearable, because they reminded him of the family he had disappointed, the standards he had fallen short of, and though he typed out thanks, he left the messages unanswered, retreating deeper into his solitude. At that very hour, Kane made his way into Billy Abbott's study again, uninvited but purposeful, carrying with him the calmness of a man who had already planted enough chaos to step back and watch it bloom. He told Billy once more that he had abandoned his takeover plans, that he was focused now only on his children, but Billy, sharp-eyed and restless, wasn't convinced, because he had seen too many men in Genoa City claim repentance only to strike harder when the time was right. Their exchange grew tense as Billy pressed him, asking why he had chosen this moment to quit, why he suddenly cared about damage done, and Kane, unflinching, admitted that watching Lily cry had broken something in him, that he had realized ambition was worthless if it left her wounded. Yet, in the back of his mind, Kane also relished the fact that Lily was crying over something he had given her, the video, his message, his lingering presence, and that contradiction fueled Billy's suspicion that Kane's surrender was merely another calculated pose. When Sally arrived later and pressed Billy for details, Billy confessed he couldn't shake the feeling that Kane wanted him off balance, wanted the Newmans distracted, wanted everyone watching the wrong direction while he moved quietly in another, and Sally, intrigued, suggested they dig deeper, that Abbott Communications could solidify its reputation if they were the ones to expose Kane's true agenda, whatever it might be. Elsewhere, Nick Newman was still reeling from Phyllis Summer's sharp tongue in the park, her angry voicemail to Kane rattling in his ears, and though he tried to warn her not to let Kane pull her into another destructive spiral, Phyllis was relentless, insisting that she had control, that she could manage Kane, that she didn't need Nick's interference. Their argument replayed in his mind as he sat at society later that night, watching Lily enter with red-rimmed eyes and a distracted air, and he wondered if perhaps Kane's shadow stretched wider than anyone realized, entangling Phyllis, Lily, Nate, and Audra all at once. The next morning, Audra returned to Abbott Communications, her posture stiff and her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, determined to project strength even as whispers rippled through the staff about her breakup with Nate. She threw herself into work, barking orders, demanding precision for the upcoming launch. But the harder she pushed, the more obvious it became that she was unraveling, because her temper was short, her decisions impulsive, and her smile absent. At lunch, she ran into Claire Newman, and though their exchange was brief, the unspoken tension between them crackled. Claire calm, measured, holding the quiet power of being believed, and Audra bristling with the knowledge that Claire's word had carried more weight with Nate than all of her protests ever could. Afterward, Audra sat in her car in the Abbott parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened, and she whispered Nate's name as if saying it aloud might summon him back, might undo the chain of events that Kane had captured and spread. Meanwhile, Lily confided in Devon about the video, unable to keep the burden to herself, and Devon, furious, declared that Kane had no right to involve her in his machinations, that his so-called change of heart meant nothing if he was still manipulating emotions through recordings and messages. But Lily, through her tears, admitted that part of her still believed Kane's remorse was real, that seeing him abandon his schemes for the sake of their children might mean he was finally ready to let go of the past. Devon, protective as always, warned her not to fall for Kane's theatrics again, not when the cost had already been so high, and Lily promised she wouldn't, though deep inside she knew the promise was fragile. Across town, Nate received an unexpected visitor, Abby Newman, who brought Dominic with her for a brief visit, hoping to cheer him, and though Nate smiled at the child, his heart was heavy, because every reminder of family only emphasized what he had lost and the mistakes that had led him here. Abby, perceptive, asked softly if this was about Audra, and Nate, sighing, admitted yes, but also no, that it was about every choice that had led him to a place where he doubted himself, where he couldn't tell love from manipulation until too late. Abby urged him not to close himself off, to remember that healing came from connection, not isolation, but Nate, weary, only nodded, his mind drifting back to the video, to the look in his own eyes as Kane's camera caught him fighting for dignity and failing. At the same time, Phyllis, ever restless, began digging into Kane's recent movements, convinced that his call to her had meaning beyond what he admitted, and she began connecting threads, piecing together Kane's visits to Billy, his sudden abandonment of the takeover, and the timing of his video's release, her instincts screaming that Kane was building towards something larger. She left another message for him, demanding clarity, demanding answers, while Nick watched helplessly, knowing she was hurtling toward another disaster but powerless to stop her. And so, as another day closed in Genoa City, the city pulsed with the aftermath of Kane's recording, Lily haunted by tears she couldn't stop, Audra clawing for control she couldn't keep, Nate drowning in guilt he couldn't escape, Devon seething with protective anger, Billy torn between suspicion and grudging respect, Sally hunting for the story of her career, Phyllis chasing shadows, and Nick trying to anchor her to reality, and through it all, Kane remained the quiet conductor, the man whose video had struck a chord that no one could silence, leaving the question of whether he was truly repentant or merely preparing his most dangerous move yet. As the hours turned into days after Kane's explosive video shook Genoa City, the fallout only deepened, layering new betrayals and fresh suspicions on top of already fractured relationships, with every character in the orbit of Kane, Audra, Nate, and Lily feeling the weight of decisions they had not made but were now forced to live with. And the truth was, the longer Kane stayed silent about his intentions, the more everyone filled in the blanks with their own fears and theories, and that silence became its own kind of weapon. Lily Winters, still shaken from crying alone in the park, tried to move forward, immersing herself in work at Chancellor Winters, but Devon noticed how distracted she had become, how her hands lingered too long over her phone, how her eyes glistened when she thought no one was watching, and he pressed her, demanding to know what Kane had said or done this time, because Devon, more than anyone, knew how Kane had a way of re-entering Lily's life in moments of weakness, always with just enough sincerity to keep her wondering if he had truly changed, and though Lily tried to downplay it, Devon's instincts caught the tremor in her voice when she admitted she had seen Kane's video, that it had hurt her deeply, not just because of what Nate and Audra said, but because of the way Kane had chosen to deliver it, as if he wanted her to feel something, as if he wanted her to relive her own history with him through the lens of Nate's heartbreak. Devon grew angry, insisting that Kane had no right to drag her into this mess, that he was exploiting Nate's pain for some unspoken agenda, but Lily, with tears in her eyes, whispered that part of her still wondered if Kane's change of heart was real, if his decision to step away from Chancellor was his way of protecting not just his children but her too.